All right, well, it's 7 o'clock, so we'll get started. Good evening and welcome to the first episode of Bicycle Commuting 101. My name is Jordan Evans. I'm a transportation planner for the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments. The series is brought to you by ACOG and Watch For Me, OK. ACOG is the leading voice for regional collaboration in Central Oklahoma. Our organization is a voluntary, nonpartisan association of local governments. This includes 37 cities and 4 counties. Our mission is to advocate for regional cooperation and address common issues, solve mutual problems, and strive to improve the quality of life in Central Oklahoma. And Watch For Me is a public awareness campaign from ACOG and the City of Oklahoma City. Watch For Me seeks to educate the public on the rules of the road and aims to keep our residents safe while traveling. This is the first session in our Bicycle Commuting 101 series. We're going to have 3 more. These will cover different aspects of commuting by bike, things like picking out a route, pairing with transit, talking about bicycle maintenance, and then commuting as a parent. We'll be doing this every Tuesday at 7 o'clock during the month of September. So we hope that you register for those as well and tune in. We're going to have some more great speakers. Tonight we have 2 fantastic speakers. The first is Councilwoman JoBeth Hamon. Councilwoman Hamon was elected in 2019 to serve as the Oklahoma City Ward 6 representative. She moved to Oklahoma City in 2014. She has been working for mental health nonprofit where she coordinates mental health education, events, and suicide prevention training programs. She lives without a car, navigating the city solely on her bike and the city's Embark bus system. She volunteers for and serves on the board for the local urban farm dedicated to sustainability and providing alternative uses for empty lots in Oklahoma City. Our second speaker tonight is Ryan Fogle. Ryan is a licensed architect and co-founder of Ride OKC Bike Tours and Rentals. Ryan grew up in Tacoma Park, Oklahoma, and graduated from the University of Oklahoma in 2006. Today, he lives near downtown OKC and operates his own architecture and urban design practice, Goldie. He leads guided bike tours and tours with Ride OKC. He also volunteers with John Rex Middle School as the urban bike PE teacher and advocates for safer, more equitable streets. So tonight, we're going to hear from both of them. We encourage you to ask questions. We'll answer those at the end of the session. And with that, I will turn it over to Councilwoman Hamon.
Okay. I will get started. I'm going to just assume you all can see my screen because this is how we tested it, and I think it's all right. So yeah, like Jordan said, my name is JoBeth. I'm the city councilor here in Oklahoma City for Ward 6. My pronouns are she and her, and both Ryan and I have been sort of tasked with the sort of topic of how you get started as a bicycle commuter. So for me, that really starts with kind of identifying and defining what a bicycle commuter means. And so for me, when I got started on this journey, I guess, about 7 years ago, I really had in my mind this picture of sort of like a, urban professional in like skinny jeans on like a single speed or with like a cool, not like helmet that you wore in the 90s when you were learning to ride your bike kind of thing. And I kind of had this idea of like I would reach that goal someday of sort of being that person with like the cool messenger bag and whatnot, and have sort of over time really expanded my idea of what being a commuter means, and want to kind of make sure that we're all kind of operating from that definition, if you will, because I think for me really that the idea of what I had in my head was really actually a barrier for me and like feeling a little intimidated getting started. So, I found some pictures that I wanted to share about that showed, I think, what bicycle commuting really looks like outside of that just sort of bike messenger sort of New York City idea that I know I had culturally of what being a commuter means. So, someone in their like shorts and a rain jacket on their way to work and just like regular sneakers, kids riding to school are commuters. I'm glad to see a later session here will be the how to commute with kids, and kind of, having a family on a cargo bike are commuters. Also, I pulled this from a news story from a few years ago where the Westtown Day Shelter did a story about a bike repair station that was being installed at their facility to aid folks that come there for services. So, folks who are, maybe in their work, dickies with like their, winter layers on, going to work, or healthcare services, or whatever else it is, those folks are definitely commuters. And then, even if folks are like going to the park, or maybe they're riding to work, but they're going to be wearing, maybe their more athletic gear to get to work, and then they're going to change. I think thinking about that range of commuter as like a really broad, very flexible definition, I think has helped me kind of own that term, whereas before I felt like I kind of had to fit in this very specific box of what that meant, to be able to even call myself like a cyclist or a bicycle commuter. So just so everyone knows, that's kind of the definition that I'm operating off of. To get started too, I wanted to kind of just lay some groundwork for my own experience to kind of talk about what it is that my life on a bike looks like. So I moved here in 2014 and sort of had the mission of that I was going to try to navigate living here without a car. But I'd been living in Chicago before that, but really had never gotten on a bike there. I maybe like once or twice went down along like the Lakeshore Trail with like my house like shared bike that we had that was probably too big for me and a little uncomfortable. But before that, I really hadn't biked very much since I was probably in like middle school, and probably even more in elementary school. So getting back on a bike was a really new experience for me. It was very different than what I had experienced when I was younger. And I also want to just emphasize that I take really short trips. I think, sometimes I'll talk to people and they're like, oh, you're so like, brave. I don't know. They just have this idea, I guess, of like, I'm like riding 30 miles a day, which is like not the case at all. I take really, really short trips to go to the grocery store, to different volunteer opportunities or events in the community, to just like go meet friends for lunch, or to go to a meeting, coffee meeting or something with someone. So I'm taking probably like 1 to 3 miles is kind of my, the range that I'm often traveling in. And I think, again, like for that idea of kind of expanding that idea of what being a commuter means, it can be, maybe someone is riding to work and it's like a 20-mile adventure, but it can also be that, you're going to the park to do yoga, or to take your kids to play on the playground or something. It can be some of those shorter things just in the neighborhood, because that really is my experience personally. I also really, and I'm glad to hear that there's going to be one of the sessions that's really focused on how you pair bicycle with public transit, because I often do rely on the bus quite a bit. Especially, our weather is very unpredictable here. So, it might say it's going to be sunny all day, but sometimes maybe I go somewhere and then, it starts to rain or it gets really, really windy or something. So I often give myself kind of a break of like, if it's incredibly uncomfortable to ride my bike, I'm just going to take the bus home. Or sometimes the opposite way, where I just don't quite feel maybe the energy to get on the bike earlier in the morning. And so I take my bike with me so I can ride home, just kind of depending. But I think, again, that I had this idea in my head that like I had to bike everywhere and like never do anything else, and that's what would make me a commuter. But I think that idea of being able to just use alternate modes of transportation, and just kind of doing and recognizing like what you need based on sort of what's going on around you is definitely something I try to encourage people to think about. And then I just feel like I would be sort of remiss in not mentioning this book, Everyday Bicycling by Ellie Blue. Microcosm Publishing is a small publishing firm out of Portland, Oregon. And I just can't ever say enough good things about Ellie Blue's writing, and this book in particular was gifted to me when I first moved here and was kind of trying to navigate biking for transportation. And just for this webinar, I kind of was like sort of leafing back through it and was like, oh yeah, all of these have experience, and sort of muddled my way through. And I felt like it was a really great place to start about just, you know, it sort of more reads as a reference book. You can read it, you know, cover to cover, but it's sort of one of those like, I wonder what I should, you know, like what kind of bike should I look for? Or, you know, the weather is kind of icky. I wonder what Ellie would say about, you know, what I should wear. But I think it gave me a really good ground, kind of like a foundation, I guess, for, again, just sort of expanding that idea of what using a bike as transportation can mean. And she really does cover like A to Z, every potential topic that you wouldn't even sort of assume or think would come up. And so, you know, this, I think the library has a few copies of this. I bought, the one that was gifted to me was bought at DNA Galleries. You can find them if you just do an internet search for Microcosm. So I think if you're, especially if you're interested in kind of continuing this series of throughout September, this might be a good book to just pick up and sort of, you know, thumb through and see if there's kind of anything to add that she adds to the conversation, or maybe kind of helps emphasize what you hear in these sessions that I think sort of end up being the things that maybe will rise to the top about how to help you get started. So for today, I've sort of tasked myself with 2 of the topics, and then Ryan's going to touch on a few of the other bullet points. But the 2 that I sort of am focusing on, I feel like are the things that people, they're just like the things people most ask me, and that I feel like I have some good experience, I think, in trying to navigate. Because again, sort of that idea of like, I had this like sort of sense in my head of like, oh, I needed to like change my whole wardrobe, and maybe even sort of like spend a bunch of money on new gear, or like special things that would like help me never sweat or something. And so, you know, again, like it's just sort of coming back to, what is your lifestyle? What are you looking to do as far as commuting, and like, where are you going? So at the end of the day, I always tell people, just wear your clothes. Whatever you have is a great place to start. And you might find over time that it makes sense to like swap out a few pieces, or maybe you don't, you know, if you're gonna bike to work, say, maybe you don't wear certain items when you bike, but if you're, you know, driving or walking or taking public transit otherwise, maybe, you know, it makes sense to wear those. But again, at the end of the day, like if you're going to the store, if you're going to go meet up with friends, like just starting where you are, you might find, like, I know there was a pair of jeans that I had when I first started biking that I just completely wore out. The like the inner thighs, just like, they were already older jeans. They were very, you know, they weren't very high quality made, and so they just completely wore out. And so I learned, okay, I guess I need to look for clothing that is maybe a little more durable if I'm gonna, you know, wear them more often on a bike. But it really, again, it's just sort of a journey, and starting where you are, I think, is the main sort of encouragement I have, especially when it comes to clothes. But I have sort of found some things along the way that maybe would be helpful. And I think number 1 is definitely the sort of comfort and flexibility aspect of a piece of clothing. You know, I tend to wear skinny jeans, and a few pairs that I have are not very flexible in like the knees, you know, maybe. And so they're not jeans that I really want to wear when I'm riding my bike. The other thing I've run into is different, you know, maybe tops, or if it's a dress or something, if they tend to be fairly tight in the shoulders, that's not usually comfortable when I'm like leaning forward on my handlebars. So just thinking about something that's really flexible and comfortable to move around in. I know I've tended towards those clothes anyway in my day-to-day life, because I don't even like really sitting at a desk at work and being sort of uncomfortable. But, you know, if you have some pieces that are, you know, maybe it's like a blazer that isn't going to move as well, maybe it's just something you throw on later when you get to work or get to that meeting. But finding, the things that you can move in fairly well, I think is kind of key, just so you're not uncomfortable when you're biking, because you have a lot of other things to be paying attention to and thinking about. I've also found, this is again for me, maybe there are people out there who don't sweat very much, but I sweat a lot no matter what how warm or cold it is outside. So I've really learned to avoid certain fabrics, particularly anything that's like kind of polyester, anything that's kind of based in a plasticky sort of foundation of a fabric. I've just found it doesn't breathe very well. It seems like it ends up holding a lot of the bacteria and stuff that ends up making things smell bad from, being active in a human body. So I've actually ended up sort of culling a lot of things, that a lot of tops, especially women's blouses, I found they really like to make them in these like polyester blends that they just, again, they don't wick sweat very well. They don't breathe very well. And so I've really sort of transitioned to more cotton heavy kind of tops. There's a few brands that I really like that I'll mention. Toad & Co. is one in particular. They just make a lot of, it's a lot of hiking active wear, but I found they have a lot of fun, nice tops that are, that could be used for more professional settings, if you will. But in my, if I'm just going to a meeting or going to the grocery store, I'm just going to wear a t-shirt and jeans, or t-shirt and shorts or whatever. So anything that's sort of more on that kind of cotton, more breathable end, I would just, again, it's your experience. Maybe you don't sweat, and maybe wearing like that cute polyester blouse is great for you, but I have found that doesn't work great for me. So just a potential tip. I think, and this seems fairly obvious of like considering what the weather is, but I think in particular, when you think about how our weather can be in Oklahoma and how sort of wildly it can sort of flux between the day or during the day, thinking about what the weather is, if it's kind of cooler in the morning, maybe you can get away with, not wearing that extra layer. But maybe if it's kind of colder out, you kind of have to think about, what layers do I need to wear? One tip that I do remember getting from Ellie's book that I swear by is kind of trying to figure out what to wear when it's cold outside. And whether I'm going to a meeting or to the grocery store, whatever it is to step outside in what you're wearing. And if you feel a little bit cold, it's kind of the perfect amount of layers. I found that if I end up adding that extra like sweater or long sleeve shirt layer, I'm too hot. And so I remember when I read that, I was like, oh, that's surely you're not going to heat up that much. But really, truly, I've learned okay, if I put on that extra fleece shell or whatever it is, I end up getting way too hot and kind of carrying that around the rest of the day. So again, kind of considering what is the weather, is it potentially going to rain later, or what is the temperature flux going to be throughout the day? And I think that kind of, again, goes back to that point of layers. So often what I'll do, especially if I'm sort of in that space of wanting to look a little more professional, maybe I am going to a meeting or going to an office sort of setting, what I'll often end up doing is taking that blazer or cardigan or whatever it is, that's sort of that outside layer that I might wear when I get to a place, but I'm not going to wear it on the ride. So I can kind of let my body breathe a little bit more, but then put that layer on. Again, I find is really helpful. Again, especially because the weather can kind of change throughout the day, just bringing that extra sweater or whatever it is can be really helpful, just depending on, sometimes it's you don't need that sweater while you're riding, but maybe when you get to the office that's incredibly air conditioned, you need that extra sweater. So, I think there is that piece that we aren't terribly used to when we live, and operate in cars so often, is that we can our car ends up kind of being our storage locker, whereas I'm usually carrying sort of a few extra things on me. And so, that for me goes back to having a good bag or, bike bag on my bike. But, just being prepared, I think, to change your expectation of, I might be carrying the sweater around for the rest of the day, or it might be tucked into the bottom of my bag because I'm not going to need it. I think just sort of changing that expectation of your wardrobe and what you may or may not utilize throughout the day is just sort of a mental shift that I know I had to kind of think about, even when I just started using public transit more regularly versus having a car where I could just, leave my five sweaters, an extra pair of shoes in, because I could just run out and grab it if I needed it. And then I think the other thing, again, that I kind of get the most questions about is around hygiene. And I think there is that expectation or sort of assumption of like, oh, wow, you biked here, like, why don't you look like a complete mess? And not to say that can't happen, because I do often feel like I show up places sort of feeling very sweaty and out of breath. But that's why I always recommend to people to give yourself time to cool down. And, maybe you're one of those people, again, that never sweats and you're always looking cool, calm, and collected. But especially in the weather we have right now, like, I can't go anywhere without just like pouring sweat out of my face, like that Jordan Peele meme. So I always try to give myself like 10 to 15 minutes before I'm supposed to like meet someone or be in a meeting. If I'm going to the grocery store, I'll probably just walk around the store sort of like slowly drying myself off. But if I have to kind of be somewhere and be focused on something, I'll try to give myself that 10 to 15 minutes just to, let my body sort of, finish sweating, finish kind of cooling down, but also to catch my breath, get a drink of water. So I think that's, again, just sort of one of those mental shifts that sometimes you have to kind of like think about, that's different. That it's not, the end of the world. It's, hopefully people would tell me if I was walking around the office smelling bad all day, but it hasn't happened yet. So maybe people are being polite, but I think just that time to be able to cool down is really important. The other thing that I really recommend for folks, especially again, if you tend to sweat a lot, is wet wipes. Just having a pack in your bag, or maybe if you're going to an office, like in your office desk, just to be able to like kind of towel down a little bit. And even if you don't have wet wipes, sometimes I'll just go to the bathroom, like literally, I sort of funny little story, did this one day at council where I literally just went into the bathroom in City Hall and just like stuffed paper towels under my underarms because I didn't have anything else, and it was really hot, and I was just like, I can't go into this council meeting just like dripping sweat. So I just kind of stuffed some paper towels in my underarms, and then once I kind of cooled down, I just threw them away. So just not, again, adjusting expectations and sort of that mental shift of, what do you need to do to just get yourself kind of cooled down back to kind of a nice stasis level in your body. And the other piece that comes with that is just bringing deodorant. So again, whether you need to like stash this in a drawer or just carry it with you, just having, being able to reapply deodorant, I think is, again, maybe just sort of adjusting our expectations. But again, the smell of body odor comes from, that bacteria that is created in, our sort of recessed parts of our body that are just, damp and musty and don't get a lot of sunlight. So being able to have a deodorant that maybe has some antibacterial properties, or something that can help just dry you off, I've found it's just helpful to have a little bit with me in whatever bag I have where I take. And then the last thing around hygiene, I feel like, which is something I didn't fully anticipate needing to think about, but I feel like I'd be remiss in not mentioning it, is for anyone who menstruates. I found when I first started biking a lot, especially, like I said, I tend to wear skinny jeans a lot, or kind of a skinny pant. So anything that was kind of tighter, wearing tampons and disposable pads, I found to be very uncomfortable. Partially, I think, from the end of tampons, it's absorbing every bit of moisture. And then the disposable pads, I just found just again that kind of plasticky material, something that is like, again, absorbing is just its main purpose is to absorb moisture, and so it's absorbing the moisture, but it's also absorbing all of that, all of those that bacteria and stuff that's just going to sit there and create smells, and it just doesn't breathe very well. So I ended up switching to a menstrual cup, which I found to be way more comfortable, partially because it, you know, it's meant to be, it's an internal catchment mechanism, which just feels very, very technical term that I just came up with. But it's not completely just like sucking every part of your body dry. And so it allows for still a little bit of moisture and just again, kind of letting your body do what it naturally needs to do. And then I also switched to reusable like cloth pads, which I again found to be a lot more comfortable, partially because the kind I get there, it's a cotton fabric, and so again, it just breathes better, it dries faster, it does, again, it just doesn't hold all of the moisture and all that bacteria that ends up just one, making things incredibly uncomfortable, but also just being sort of a little petri dish for creating smells throughout the day. So whether that's like you want to explore some sort of like internal menstrual cup or a cotton pad, or whether maybe it's just changing that disposable pad once you get to the office or wherever you might be going. But I just, again, feel like I'd be remiss in not mentioning it because it is such a, it was such a surprising element to me that I had not realized, oh, this is something that I probably would need to think about. And I know in Ellie's book, she talks about it in a lot more detail, and in general, I think about kind of body health for whatever, you know, parts you might have, just thinking about, you know, how to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and, you know, making sure that you're not kind of storing bacteria in places that end up being uncomfortable or unhygienic, unhealthy. So those are sort of, you know, just like we're people in bodies. So I just felt like it would be a disservice not to mention it because I think it is part of the conversation. So that's the end of my part. And I do, like I said just now, I do think that this is a conversation. And so I really would love for anyone to stay in touch. I know we have a little bit of kind of a Q&A at the end, but I don't, in my mind, it doesn't necessarily have to stop there. So you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, any of those handles. You can also email me at ward6@okc.gov, and I get those emails because I do think, again, it's like, it's a lot of trial and error that is what I've learned, and I still don't feel like I'm fully there. Like sometimes I will get a new pair of pants or a skirt, and I'm like, well, this is not a biking skirt. So it's just sort of trying to learn, you know, what's comfortable, what do I like, and so I think that's the fun part about it too, is that you can kind of make it a conversation. And, you know, if you're on Twitter, you kind of maybe know of OKC Bike Twitter. You know, so I think there is that fun element of being able to build community of like shared experience, but also those divergent experiences of, well, this worked for me, you know, here's my tips and tricks, but maybe something else worked for you. So I think that's kind of the fun part about that I've discovered about using bikes for transportation, is it does create a lot of community, both in the element of, you know, riding down the street and making eye contact with people and saying hi maybe, but also in the element of like, yeah, I've tried this brand of pants and it's great, you know, in my experience. So yeah, I appreciate you all for listening in, and I will pass it along to Ryan now, or maybe Jordan will, I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I'll pass it on to Ryan. That was really great. Yeah, like you said, we do have some questions coming in, and we'll have some time at the end to answer those. So please keep sending those in. We have the chat function there that you can send it in, or the Q&A function. But yeah, I'll turn it over to Ryan, and Ryan can get started on his section.
Sounds good, guys. Great job, JoBeth. Let's see what we got here. Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
All right, sweet. Well, I'll go ahead and get started. Again, my name's Ryan Fogle. I'm an architect and also co-founder of Ride OKC, which is a bike tour and rental company that me and my wife started back in, I guess, 2018. So, man, I've been at this a long time, I guess. I've been on two wheels pretty much my whole life. I got started on motorcycles. I got my first one when I was 5 years old, and I didn't really get into bicycles until like college. I got poor as a college student, and riding bikes was kind of a good way to stay active and kind of get around campus and stuff. So I got into that then. So let's see. Yeah, so in OKC, I've been riding about 11 years. You know, I like all types of terrain, off-road, gravel, pavement, but you know, commuting is kind of what this whole webinar is about, so I'll kind of put my focus on that mostly. So this is just some photos of some of my experience on two wheels. Kind of, it goes back really, I guess, to you know, whenever I met my wife. We met in leadership class about 5 years ago, and although I had always been kind of a cyclist, my wife, she was a big kind of world traveler, and the first trip we took together, it was to Vancouver, and she took me on a bike tour. She's always talking about these bike tours, and I was like, what is that? You know, I've done some races and stuff, but I didn't really know what a bike tour was, and turned out it was kind of a guided tour through a city, and you tend to see some off the beaten path locations that you normally wouldn't have seen, some maybe locals only type areas, and a lot of times that would become the best part of our trip. So that's kind of how Ride OKC came about. We wanted to kind of bring that back to our own city, and you know, bike tour companies don't really exist that often in American cities, and I didn't really put a whole lot of thought into it. I guess after we founded Ride OKC, I picked up a book on our honeymoon. It was called The Dutch Blueprint for Urban Vitality, which is kind of goes into you know, American cities versus some of the European cities. Of course, America's designed around the car and, you know, more pedestrian friendly. So it kind of opened my design eye, if you will, to kind of some of the where I guess American cities fall short on bike infrastructure and just really urban design. So that kind of turned me into a bit of an activist, if you will. So let's see, moving on. You know, I guess a little bit more that I kind of want to touch on is, back up a little bit there, kind of why I ride, I guess. I think that's kind of important to touch on. I kind of mentioned the Ride OKC thing, but as far as being a commuter, really it just, you know, it brings a lot of beauty into your life, really. You get to see the city fully, you know, living inside a car. I used to commute down to Norman for a couple years, and it's just kind of a sad existence. To me, it was, at least. You know, you don't get to have any chance encounters with anybody. You don't get to interact or wave or share a smile. But yeah, being on a seat of a bike, you have some unobstructed panoramic views, and you know, it's kind of set at a pace where you can take it all in. Wherever you're in a car, you know, stuff just kind of zooms by you and you don't really see it. I can't tell you how many times I've been leading a bike tour for Ride OKC, and people have just been like, wow, I've lived here my whole life and I never even noticed that. So definitely some advantages to being on a bike. It's an efficient use of, you know, time. I feel like you can kind of kill two birds with one stone. If you use it for transportation to get to work, it can, you know, be your exercise for the day. Maybe you could skip the gym. The connection to community is really cool. I kind of mentioned the chance encounters and whatnot, but you just tend to meet so much more people when you're on a bike. It's definitely a ton of fun. You know, following up on some of the things I mentioned previously, just really all those things combined really can improve your overall mental health, I think. So, and of course, the kids. I'm a new father, so it's kind of near and dear to my heart. I think just seeing more people on bikes can kind of maybe shift the mindset of a lot of people that have always, driven a car to work or just around town. If you see more bikes, maybe the tipping point will occur and people will be like, well, they're riding, maybe I should too. So anyway, yeah, I just hope, one day my kid won't be afraid to ride in the street, and hopefully it'll be safe enough for him to do that with his friends. So let's just hop right in here. So bike security is one of my first talking points, and we'll go over a little bit of the theft prevention, different kinds of bike locks, and a few other things. So there's some pretty common types of bike locks that you see. I personally use the one on the left. It's kind of a chain that's like wrapped in some nylon fabric. Really, the fabric is there just to kind of protect your bike from getting some scratches and dings on it. But usually there's some pretty heavy metal, chain back behind there. The kind of locks I like to use are the combination ones. I'm pretty bad at losing keys and stuff. So just personal preference. The one in the middle there, the U-lock, is maybe the most common. You see those a lot of times. I think they kind of started out in New York, but those ones kind of take up a lot of space, so I'm not a huge fan of it, but they are pretty secure. I have tried out the one on the right too. It's kind of a foldy. We call it a foldy lock. It kind of articulates in a way where it can kind of reduce down into kind of a compact size. It'll fit right on your bike. You don't really notice it as much. And they can be pretty secure too. The one at the top, I think it's a little less secure, but they really fold up into some really kind of small space. I think it's almost like a nylon. That would probably be okay for like just a quick in and out, but I think you could probably just snip that off with some shears. So, it's really just personal preference, I think, kind of what you're looking for. Going to the next one, following up with the bike lock, the way to secure your bike to an actual like bike rack. It's a pretty good example here in the middle. So you can see that guy locked both of his wheels to the bike rack as well as the frame. Some people, you've probably seen this in the street before, where there's like a bike rack and the only thing there is like the frame. That's because somebody got out there with a wrench and some tools and just stole his wheels. Same thing here in this photo. You can see he took his seat off. A lot of times people will just like unscrew the little seat latch there and just steal your seat. So, I mean, this is probably the most secure way to lock your bike, but you can see he had to take a cable and a big U-lock. So, I mean, unless that person was carrying a backpack, that's going to take up a lot of space and a lot of weight. So if it was me, I'd probably just have one of those locks. I would try to get the front wheel and the frame secured to the bike rack. Probably leave my seat there too, honestly. But ideally, you wouldn't have to lock your bike up outside. I mean, I have a lot of friends that have had bikes stolen. I've recently experienced some theft with Rad OKC. And man, if you can bring your bikes indoors, that is always preferred. You can see the photo on the bottom left. It's, some guys, maybe home office, maybe that's an employer, but man, if you have a nice bike, bring that thing inside. A lot of businesses will allow you to do that. Sometimes I just do it without asking permission. Maybe that's the wrong thing to do. My wife kind of always gives me a hard time for doing that, but I mean, those things cost more than a laptop sometimes, so you're not just going to leave a laptop outside, are you? I mean, that's just me. But, some businesses are more bicycle friendly than others. I got Anthem Brewing down there in the bottom, which is a local business kind of downtown. They've got ample bike parking. You can see it's right there by the front entrance and some windows, so you can kind of keep an eye on things pretty good. And then the downtown library there up to the right, they've got pretty good bike parking right by the front door too, so you can kind of keep an eye on it. Let's see, there is actually some certifications you can get if you are interested in talking to your employer about being a bicycle-friendly business. The American League of Bicyclists can actually certify you. And I don't know, it's kind of like, I think you get like a plaque or something, and it's appealing to new hires. Like if you're bicycle-friendly, I think Facebook and Google and a few others are all certified. And there are a few around OKC that are certified too. So yeah, the photo up in the upper left, I just like to throw that in there because basically one like single parallel parking spot, you can usually fit about 20 bicycles in a car space. So just kind of goes to show just how much urban space is taken up by car storage. So moving on, how to pick the right bike for you. So this one, this one kind of comes down to a lot of personal preference too, really. There's so many different types of bikes. There's probably, 500 different types of bikes. I'm gonna just kind of narrow it down to the ones I think are most suitable for commuting and getting, from point A to point B. So, we've got road bikes, we've got some cargo bikes, mountain bikes, and the one on the right there's a gravel bike. But these are kind of the ones that I specifically like to talk about. So basically, it's hard to say, I mean, at the end of the day, the best bike to ride to work or commute on is the bike you have. You don't have to spend a lot of money. You can get one off Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace for $100 sometimes. But, if you really want to get like the ideal commuter bike, some of the features I think it would have would be, fenders. If you go into like a meeting or something and you happen to hit like a puddle or something like that, you don't want a lot of dirt or mud flying up on your back. You want to show up clean. So fenders, I know they look kind of nerdy sometimes, but they are very functional. Commuter bikes a lot of times too will have like integrated headlight and tail light, and a lot of times those run off of the internal hub on the wheel, which is called a dynamo hub. And that will basically charge the light with centrifugal force. So you don't have to worry about, plugging in your batteries at night to charge your lights and stuff. And they're basically attached to the bike, so they're not easily stolen if you have to park outside. You got cargo bikes. These are recumbent bikes down here. Those are good for people that have like physical ailments or back problems. Hybrid bikes, they're kind of like a road bike, but with a front fork. So, front suspension will help absorb some of the potholes and stuff, but it does add weight, and it does tend to slow you down a little bit because when you're pedaling, it kind of compresses and it kind of kills some of your forward momentum. The city bike there, that's pretty similar to what we use for Ride OKC. You can see the handlebars are kind of swooped back. So it kind of puts your body in more of an upright seating position rather than being leaned over. So a little less kind of racy, if you will. And that's kind of the style of bike you probably see in like Amsterdam or like, I don't know, in the Netherlands or something. Of course, you got the fitness bikes. Those are the kind of the fast carbon fiber ones. If you want to get to work really quick and get some exercise, maybe that's the one for you. But those handlebars that kind of roll forward like that, those are kind of hard to get used to if you've never done it before. I actually got my first drop handlebar bike pretty recently, and it's definitely a little different. Beach cruisers, those are usually kind of clunky a little bit. I would try to avoid that personally. Folding bike, if you need to save some space, load it up in your trunk or put it on the bus. Maybe you're getting on the train or something, that could be a good option. The electric bikes, those are really coming on strong. It could be the future of urban transportation, maybe. Sales, I think, quadrupled the last year I saw. And a lot of like avid cyclists like to make fun of those bikes, but You know, they serve a purpose. You know, you can really extend your range. Say you live out in the suburbs, you could actually, you know, think of an electric bike as like a car replacement if you wanted to. They are a little bit more expensive, usually start, you know, over $1,000, but they'll go up to usually 28 miles per hour. And yeah, you can get to work and, you know, you don't have to pedal unless you want to. You can show up not sweaty, which is kind of nice. The gravel bike, man, that's basically just a fitness road bike with fatter tires. These bike manufacturers do a great job of basically trying to, you know, market different types of bikes to you to try to make you think you need more than one or a new bike. They're always doing these little crafty things, but the gravel bike, I do have one. It is, I will say, it is kind of like a Swiss Army knife of a bike. You can take it on mountain biking, trails, gravel, road, really pretty much anywhere. But again, at the end of the day, the best bike is the one you have or the one you can get or afford. So moving into safety, I'm going to talk about some of these items off here to the right, you know, little helmets, some hand signals, a little bit of road rules and stuff. And, you know, route selection, that's going to be covered in a future session fully. I just want to touch on it just real quick. The Parks and Rec department does have some really good bicycle maps on their website in PDF form, but you can get a printed one if you go visit them. OKC has over 110 miles of bike trails and growing. And if you've been downtown lately, you're probably seeing a lot more of the green paint and some of the more semi-protected infrastructure with the little, you know, plastic bollards that are kind of separating it from car traffic. So, man, it's getting safer every day to ride a bike, I feel like. So this is a good place to start. You know, check out some of the trails. You can get to Lake Hefner and Overholser pretty easily, and soon you'll be able to basically loop all the way to Draper pretty easily without ever seeing a car. Of course, Google Maps, there's a little tab on there to switch to a bicycle, and that will kind of reroute your routes to be slower speed streets usually and a little bit more bike friendly streets. And it'll get you pretty close, but sometimes it doesn't, you know, make the greatest decision. But again, it's just a great place to kind of get started. And you'll figure it out more as you get along. So some of the basic hand signals, you know, these officially don't go into effect until November 1st. We just have some new bike legislation that went into effect, or I'm sorry, it does go into effect November 1st. So the, I believe it's the right turning signal. You used to have to kind of stick your hand up in the air like this, but now you can just use your other hand and point right. Some of the other new laws that go into effect November 1st, we can treat stop signs like yield signs and stoplights like stop signs if it's safe to proceed through the intersection. So it's really good at not killing our momentum, which is nice. You know, a lot of cyclists were already kind of doing that anyway, so it just kind of basically legalizes what we kind of always wanted to do, which is pretty great. You know, another thing that's going into effect is technically illegal to honk, for cars to honk at cyclists unless it's an emergency situation. We'll see how that goes. As you may know, there's a lot of animosity between car drivers and cyclists, but you know, we have a legal right to the road. And the biggest complaint I see on like Twitter, like this is like nationally, is why is this bicycle riding on the street when there's a sidewalk right there? And most people are just ignorant. They don't know the law. It's illegal in most business districts and downtown settings to ride a bicycle on the sidewalk. You know, that's for people walking, pedestrians. So yeah, we have a legal right to the road, and that's why we use it. It's illegal for us to go on the sidewalk. But if, for instance, you do have to get on the sidewalk, you know, sometimes for safety reasons, we got to hop on the sidewalk, or, you know, your bike racks are on the sidewalk. So we got to get on there at some point. If you do, just the law states you basically have to dismount your bike and walk it past any pedestrian that you may encounter. So just keep that in mind. Let's see. Let's do some helmet selection next. So, I mean, key to picking out a helmet, I mean, it's not a law in Oklahoma, but it's always a good idea to wear one. I feel like I always wear one, mainly just because I don't want to be another statistic that, you know, if I die on a bike, someone will be like, oh, well, he wasn't wearing a helmet. So I don't want them to have the option to say that. Of course, so many different styles. You just have to pick one that kind of suits you. A couple things to keep in mind, you know, the ones with more holes in it are going to have better ventilation. You'll be less likely to get sweaty and have, you know, sweat draining down into your eyes. Just keep that in mind. Some of them have a brim. You can kind of flip up a little visor for sun and stuff, which is nice. Got some brands down there that are worth checking out that I think are pretty nice looking. Let's see, you know, fitting. You want 2 fingers above your eyebrows. You want the straps 2 different V's on either side of your ear, and you want to make sure that it's doesn't rock back and forth when you shake your head. You don't want it too loose, but you don't want it too tight that it gives you a headache also. A couple other things that are kind of, you know, slightly obscure bike laws I think that you guys should know about. Those little rear reflectors that you see on the back of your bike, those things, man, I remember the first bike I bought from a shop, I basically took those off like right away because I thought they were nerdy and kind of pointless. But legally in Oklahoma City, you have to have a rear red reflector. Yeah, that's a law. If you're riding at night, you do have to have a white headlight, a lamp that stays on all the time. You know, sometimes you see the ones that blink and kind of do a strobe effect. Legally, it's supposed to stay on, solid burning. You know, one life hack that I've discovered for those rear reflectors that tend to fall off is some of this 3M reflective tape. And you could just like cut off a little bit of that and put it on your rear seat post, and it stays on. You never have to think about it. So that might get you out of a bind with the police if they want to stop you for something. Whoa, sorry, I think I just, hang tight guys. There we go. So yeah, I guess, man, that was the end of my presentation, kind of wrapped it up there. So that should leave us a little bit of time to do a little Q&A. If you do want to keep in touch with me and my business account, it's @RideOKC. I'm on Twitter, the Insta, Facebook. I think I'm on LinkedIn too. If you want to email me for questions or, you know, tell me that I messed something up on this, feel free. It's ryan@rideokc.com. And man, I hope you guys had a good time. Hope you learned a couple things, and I'll hand it back over to Jordan.
Yeah, thank you. That was great. And thank you both for your time in doing this. We do have a few questions that we'll get to. Let's see. So our first one, what resources would you recommend to learn the rules of the road for cyclists? I might be able to answer this one a little bit. So we do have the Watch For Me OK campaign. This is a public safety education campaign, mostly focused on bicycle and pedestrian. We have social media, which goes out, informs drivers on their rights or their responsibilities on the road. And we have some information on our website specific to bicyclists and pedestrians. But it is going to vary kind of from city to city a little bit. So check with your local municipality. If you live in OKC, check their website. If you live in Edmond, check their website. Do you all have anything to add to that? Anything else on Zinnia?
Yeah, I would just say, you know, the Muni code on Oklahoma City's website, okc.gov, it changes periodically, the bike laws do. So there's some pretty obscure bike laws in there too. So I don't know. I like to kind of scroll through them from time to time. I can put a link out there if you want. I can share it with Jordan maybe.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think if you put it in the chat, that should work.
The chat? Okay, I'll just type it in the chat. Yeah. Here it comes.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so we have another question. How can we as a community advocate for dedicated and protected bicycle infrastructure?
This one might be for me, but I think you all probably have very good perspectives on this as well. I honestly, I think the best thing you can do is be consistently noisy, which is kind of how I feel like I ended up running for council. Was I just like, when I moved here, I was taking the bus and I got off the bus and I was like, why aren't there sidewalks here? Who does that? Like, who's in charge of this? Or like, the bus doesn't run on Sundays. Why, what's happening? So, you know, obviously, you know, whether you live in Oklahoma City or one of the, you know, metro municipalities, finding out who your city councilor is. And, you know, I hesitate to say this maybe because I know, you know, I think all of the municipalities in our region are, you know, it's either volunteer or essentially a volunteer position where most folks are not doing this full time. But I really found that sometimes people will reach out to me and just want to have coffee and chat about the things that are important to them. And, you know, maybe in 3 months, I end up at a meeting and, you know, a light bulb goes off and I'm like, oh, I had that conversation with so-and-so once. And again, you know, it might not happen right away. And I think that's the other thing that I have had to even like counsel myself about is patience, because I know I want to like turn the ship like 180 degrees, but that's just unfortunately not the way the world works. And sometimes maybe that's a fortunate thing. But, you know, I think having that, creating that relationship with your elected officials, even, you know, even your state elected officials, because I know some of those laws that Ryan mentioned had been initiated by, you know, Oklahoma City residents connecting with their state senators and their state representatives and getting some of those just kind of common sense things changed to allow cyclists to have a little more autonomy over how they move throughout, you know, our spaces, our public spaces. So, but I think, you know, if you live in Oklahoma City, even just educating yourself on what is coming up and what projects are on the horizon so that you can kind of see, okay, what's our next step? What do we need to do after that? You know, would be going to the okc.gov/better safer, which is where you can see all of the bond projects from 2007 and 2017. And then the Oklahoma City Bike Walk OKC plan. So you can also find that on okc.gov and just kind of seeing which those projects, if they're not covered in those bond projects, the next sort of layer would be through MAPS 4 funding to kind of fund the next layer of them. And I think, you know, paying attention to things like your traffic commission, and, you know, even going to that muni code and finding like, you know, what are some of the ordinances that are, you know, again, this is maybe if you're like extra wonky and really want to do some of that digging through legal jargon. But, you know, there were things that I didn't even know about this, but the staff had to present an ordinance change to allow parking protected bike lanes, because we actually had an ordinance that said that cars had to be parked within like 12 inches of a curb. And so our staff are do their extreme due diligence, and they were not going to say that we could do car protected, you know, parking protected bike lanes because it was going to clash with city code. So it kind of depends on what level of wonkiness you want to get. But I think just being noisy and expressing that you want safe streets for you, your kids, your family, your friends is really the core. And then I think also educating people in your life, because I think Ryan had a good point about the idea that there's this clash between people who drive cars and people who ride bikes, but at the end of the day, or people who are on foot, but at the end of the day, we're all just people trying to get from A to B as safely as possible. And so, you know, there are opportunities maybe to have those conversations with people who are maybe less gracious about someone who might, you know, use a stop sign as a yield sign and say, well, actually that is legal now. And, you know, maybe this is a reason why that makes sense to do that. So, or even inviting, you know, those folks to go out on a bike ride and experiencing that. So that's kind of my brain on how to advocate. I don't know if y'all have anything else you want to add.
Yeah, I would just like to add, yeah, hitting up your city councilor. If you can like I did this about a year ago with when I was living in James Cooper's ward. My best friend and best man at my wedding got hit by a car on his bike, and I basically, man, I kind of architected this intersection. Like I took some photos and like some Google map. I did all these arrows like, hey, this is not safe because of this. And it basically just gave him, you know, James, it gave him an avenue to basically send it up the chain. So if you can have something, even if it's just an email or something for like people like JoBeth to send to, you know, other people and kind of dish out, you know, thoughts. Once it's documented, they basically almost have to respond. I think it's almost, I don't know, it's almost like, it makes me feel like they're legally obligated to respond a little bit, but maybe not.
It does put a different amount of pressure on them, I will say that.
Yeah, and I will say that James got some work done. That intersection has been improved, so it really does work.
Yeah, thank you. So another question, one of the biggest barriers to people biking to work is the sprawl of our region. How close do you all live to the places you're biking to?
So for me, I like I said, I don't go very far. I think one time I went like 14 miles in one day, and that was like to and from a place, and I was like, okay, that's me for the week. Like I'm not standing up tomorrow. So I do, you know, I live, you know, in the more dense parts of the city that are a little bit easier to navigate on a bicycle. But I do think, you know, Ryan's the map that he showed of, you know, our trail network can be very useful. And I know a few folks who utilize those trails to actually, there's a gentleman who I'm a neighbor with in my building who actually uses the Will Rogers Trail to commute up to like Portland and 50th from downtown. So he does use an e-bike also. So that kind of helps him be able to make that distance, especially if it's windy or anything like that, to just get there. So I know that's such a big barrier. And I know I always try to, you know, recognize that, you know, I tried to set my life up so that this was the easiest way to navigate the city. But, you know, I think that's kind of, again, goes back to that point of maybe it's not every day that you're like biking to work and you're, you know, like curated bike outfit. Maybe it is just you're going to the park on the weekend with your kids, or you kind of start out, maybe I'll try to bike once a week to work and kind of see how it goes. And so trying to just kind of find where you can and maybe just try to challenge yourself around, you know, maybe I tried this route one day and I go on the trail, but then I try like streets the next day and sort of, you know, or the next month. So that's kind of, you know, I'm a 1 or 2 mile kind of person. So I know our city presents a different challenges based on where you're living and where you're trying to go.
Yeah, I would kind of echo that. You know, for my commutes, I try to keep it, you know, if it's more than like, I don't know, 3 miles each way, I'm probably gonna consider driving. But, you know, other times if I'm looking for like a workout, like kind of a longer ride, like I've gone up to like 105 miles in one day, which is kind of crazy. That was not normal, but I mean, it just depends on what you want to do. But yeah, typically for a commute, I'm looking for a shorter distance.
Yeah, I work 4 miles from home. So I typically pick kind of the nicer days. If it's over like 90 degrees, I'll probably drive. Or if I have like, you know, a big work meeting or something I have to go to in the middle of the day, I'll typically drive. But on the nicer days or the days where I don't have a lot going on, those are the days I really pick to bike. And then going around town, typically it's, yeah, like you said, 1 to 3 miles is sort of my average.
Yeah.
All right, so I know it is past 8, so if anyone has to jump off, feel free to do so. We are recording this. We have 2 more questions, so we'll get to those. But I want to be respectful of your time. So one of these questions, do you have a recommended group rides or any recommended group rides for people wanting to get comfortable biking in Oklahoma City, but are uneasy of navigating or starting on their own?
Yeah, absolutely. So, man, there's this group, pretty cool group called Hide and Go Bike. They do a pretty big group ride every Thursday. Usually leaves from Mesta Park. And it looks like there's anywhere between 20 and like 60 people some nights. Pretty casual ride, people are wearing just normal clothes. And I think that the rides average between like 8 to 12 miles. They usually stop and hang out and have a good time. But yeah, that's every Thursday. And I think it starts around like 6 or 7 usually, depending on how hot it is. Just about every bike shop has some kind of group ride at least once a week, sometimes more. And they're kind of varying speeds, Some of those guys are pretty fast, and you definitely want to pay attention to kind of the miles per hour that they're doing before you just show up. And I realize some of those group rides can be pretty intimidating. If you show up with like, I don't know, regular clothes on, you're not wearing spandex, and you don't have like a carbon fiber bike, sometimes you get some looks. But generally speaking, most of the bike rides are pretty, open-minded, come as you are. Oh, another really good one too, if you want to do off-road gravel, one of my personal favorites is up in Guthrie. It's called Guthrie Bike Night. That's every Thursday at 6. Really chill ride. That one, its mileage ranges between like 15 and 20 miles, but it's on these gravel country roads. It's some of the most beautiful scenery you'll see, and that leaves from Hoboken Coffee, and super cool coffee shop there right by Guthrie High School.
Yeah, I would echo Hide and Go Bike. I think the thing I appreciate about them is, again, kind of coming from like I'm not like I'm going to ride 20 miles kind of person, is that they do stop and kind of take breaks and hang out. Maybe they stop at like a bar or a coffee shop or just at a park to kind of catch your breath, get some water, kind of, socialize. But I think they also have a Sunday ride, which they'll do like a really long ride on a Sunday and then a kind of shorter one on Thursday. So you can kind of like try something out. And then I know I'm on I'm probably going to get this wrong, but the OKC Bicycle Riders Facebook group, they post a lot of those different rides that I know I'm typically very intimidated to show up at, because they are kind of more of the spandex, we're going to go 100 miles kind of thing. But I think it does depend on kind of like what vibe you're looking for, as well as kind of what is the mileage or miles per hour. And I found that even if sometimes I've what's the other one, the Full Moon bike ride, I think, is another one where it kind of feels a little lower, just a little more just like families, just really kind of chill, steady, slow pace. They're not trying to get a certain number of miles, and it's just kind of about enjoying the scenery, which is definitely more my speed. So it's another one I would recommend.
Yeah, and also the Oklahoma Bike Society has several group rides, and they're going to be more for fitness too, but they have several of those every week. And every May, ACOG does a bike to work day ride. It's typically the third Friday in May, I think. But we'll meet at different spots in the city and then get together at Bicentennial Park, kind of hang out. This was a fun one last year. We had the slowest bike race that Ryan helped host, and it was a lot of fun. So that's a good way of kind of dipping your toe into it, seeing if biking to work's a good thing for you. And it's a low entry. So, and our final question: what is the process to get a bike rack installed in front of a business?
Yeah, I know a little bit about that.
I don't know that answer very well.
So basically, you have to have permission from the business owner if you're not the business owner, but you have to get a what's it called? It's a revocable permit. So I think those cost like $50 to apply for, and basically you have to present like a site plan. It shows like the road, the sidewalk distance, and like where the building starts. And they usually want the utilities on there, so like gas lines, electric lines, stuff like that. And basically you have to get every utility to sign off that, hey, it's okay to put this bike rack there. And basically it's just a permit. It basically says that if for any reason we need to go in there and dig up like a gas line or something, we're gonna tear down your bike rack. So there's no question that they destroyed your bike rack, I guess. So that's kind of the process that I'm aware of. I know Downtown OKC Partnership has put in a lot of those. So, and of course, Jordan, you probably know about it too with ACOG. You guys kind of partnered on that. So anything you want to add?
Yeah, so that one was really great. So Downtown OKC partnered with us in the city to get 50 bike racks installed downtown, and they placed them just at various locations in front of businesses or in front of parks or things that people would be going to. They also installed 5 repair stations, which are great. So if you needed to air up a flat tire or tighten up your seat or something, you could do that there. So that's a great way of doing it too. Talk with your city. We have grant funding for that kind of stuff that we can help pay for it. So definitely keep an eye on that and talk with your cities.
Yeah. The one thing I will add is that once you start talking about site plans and utilities, my eyes start to get like, oh no, this is like so much. Like oh my gosh, I'm going to start to glaze over. So I would recommend like reach out to your city councilor, because often even if they don't know exactly what to do, they can put you in touch with the staff. Or like I know often our council support staff will just intercept those emails and say, oh, you need to get in touch with this department and like just CC me on it. So sometimes if you don't know what department you want to start with in a city, just kind of going through the council or finding some kind of administrative staff to help you navigate that. Because I know like our city staff would help kind of navigate you through that process of like, what do you need? And like, maybe they can help you find those like maps that have the utilities and stuff. Cause that's like so out of my purview that, you know, if you feel intimidated by the thought of that, just maybe start asking questions, because sometimes it is just kind of being that squeaky wheel that, you know, can eventually knock some doors down. So.
Yeah, that's great. All right, and there actually is one other question. I skipped over it. About what percentage of your trips would you say are by bike?
Man. Well, I mean, I'll just tell you, mine's probably, I don't know, 10%. I'm not a huge commuter. I mean, if I'm doing like a bike tour for Ride OKC, I usually just ride my bike there. But other trips, I just got my bike equipped to where I can like put my kid on it. He's 10 months old. So I'm gonna start taking him to daycare is the plan. And hopefully it goes up a little more. But yeah, 10%, guys, it's not that much, but it's getting bigger and better. I rode to Paseo Arts Fest last weekend, and it just feels good to do it. So
Yeah, no, I love that. That's really great. I'm bad at thinking about this. I feel like since the pandemic, I just don't go a lot of places. So I'm trying to think like, well, how often do I ride? Because it really has gone down quite a bit because I'm just not going out and about to meetings as much. I'm just kind of doing them by phone or by like a virtual meeting when maybe I'd be like going to a restaurant or a coffee shop or something. I guess I would probably say I'm about 30%, and because I think I probably do about 30, 30, 30, and then I guess the rest of the time I'm just not going anywhere. But by like, you know, by foot and then bus and then bike, you know, well, maybe that other 10% before the pandemic was like driving to Tulsa for work. So maybe that's my answer. But yeah, I think it is that like just that reminder that it doesn't have to be like a 100% time of thing. Maybe it is just like going to the plaza on the weekends or for Plaza Fest when you want to avoid having to park your car. It's just finding those times that you can substitute. And then, you know, I know for me, it was one of those like, oh, it kind of, you know, hooks you a little bit. And you kind of, because I originally got a bike as like my fallback. It was like, well, I'll probably just take the bus most of the time. And then, but depending on, especially if I'm just going a couple of miles, I'm like, well, it's like kind of how Jordan said, if it's a nice day, I'm like, I'd rather do that than, you know, sit around waiting for the bus. So just finding those times where you can substitute in, I think is kind of the mindset to get in. So you don't kind of, again, like I know I felt like I had to just be like, okay, I'm 100% this now, but I think it's kind of finding those opportunities that you have to think a little bit outside the box.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, well, that is all the questions we have. Thank you again so much for your time, and thank you everyone for showing up and partaking in this webinar. We will have this recorded and it'll live on our website, so you can come back and revisit this or share it with your friends. Again, we will have our second session next Tuesday at 7 o'clock. And that one's going to be about picking a route, types of bike facilities, and pairing with transit. So thank you again. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye.